Our YouTube server back, of course, to talk about some Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, and we are here once again to talk about the trailer. It's actually been quite a while. Our last video would have been 3 weeks ago, according to YouTube, but it's pretty close to a month. It's like a couple days out from being a month old, and it was the video where we talked about like Rude in the trailer not being surprised to see our party, which is kind of interesting.
She may be new, but she's still a Turk.
Obviously, if you haven't watched that video, you can go check it out. There's a decent discussion to be had there. It is interesting that Rude isn't like surprised to see our party, right? There's a little bit of merit to that. There could be multiple reasons why that is. But when it comes to the trailer, one of the biggest talking points, of course, is the beginning of the trailer, where we're seeing most of our party on like the gurneys being carried away by like Shinra soldiers and shit. And there's a topic of debate on what's happening there, right? That could be alternate timeline copies of our characters that are dead. This could be like a vision thing with either Sephiroth the Genova, Sephinova, whoever, whatever you want to say, right? Because you do see like the little glitches throughout the beginning section at least 3 times. Or it's like Shinra propaganda, right? It's like doctored footage from Shinra, or like body doubles from Shinra, fake bodies from Shinra, something along those lines. One of the things I've always found interesting about the trailer too is in the news report they're blaming the destruction that we're seeing on a tornado. And I've never known if that's supposed to be literal. Now we do see a tornado at the end of Remake when we're in the Singularity, right? We're seeing that tornado that's like going down the highway and sucking up pieces of the highway and the cranes and all that other shit. But I don't know if that's what's happening in the real world. Was there actually a tornado, or is that just what they're saying on the news report for some reason? The thing is, too, that tornado that we're seeing at the end of Remake isn't actually destroying shit. Like, we've talked about this before. It's kind of hard to catch unless you're, like, really paying attention. But, like, it's sucking up, like, copies of shit that it's touching, right? It's not actually, like, destroying, ripping up the highway or destroying the cranes. There's just, like, a copy of that crane being pulled up into the tornado. And I believe we've talked about that like sometime within this year, and there's people that didn't even notice that until I pointed out, and we're going on like 3 to 4 years that the game's been out, right? So it's like a nice little detail that's easily missable for some people. But again, the tornado inside the Singularity is not actually destroying stuff, which is why I'm not sure if there's an actual tornado like in the real world that was actually like destroying shit, or if like they're trying to blame some of the destruction that's taking place in Midgar on a tornado that, you know, maybe didn't even happen. Now, I actually had a thought when I was recently watching somebody play through FF7 Remake that maybe they were going to blame, like, the Sector 7 destruction on a tornado that never happened, right? But obviously, that doesn't make any sense because, based on the trailer, the destruction from the tornado is happening in Sectors 0, 1, and 2. So this is, like, some unknown, untold thing right now.
We're still here at the scene of this terrible disaster, caused by a massive tornado which swept through Sectors 0, 1, and 2.
Something else people point out, too, is that apparently what they're saying on the news broadcast is different from what is happening in Remake, as in where it's all located, because they're saying that they're in, like, Sectors 0, 1, and 2, and apparently that's different from the ending of Remake. Our group is apparently in a different sector, but do we know that for sure? Like, do we know? Because we travel down a shit ton of highway as we're fighting, like, Motorball or whatever, or I guess Motor is what it's called in Remake. Like, do we know exactly where our group ended up? Like, how do we know for sure that our group, at the end of that highway, talking to Sephiroth and shit, how do we know that's not, you know, Sector 1 or 2 or something? So I actually had to retroactively come back and delete a good section of this video, because I just decided, instead of asking hypotheticals, just to do the research myself. So I pulled up an old save I have where I'm on the highway right before going to the Singularity, and pulled up that practically useless, like, a Midgar grid map thing, and you can actually see that our group is on the Midgar Expressway outside of Sector 5. So 100%, when we're leaving and going into the Singularity, we are for sure in Sector 5. Where we're at in the Singularity, I don't know. Like, when you walk through that portal, it definitely looks like a reverse version where we just came from, right? So, in theory, it's like a reversed version of the Sector 5 Expressway. But that might not be true. Like, we don't have any fucking clue when we go through the Singularity where we're at. We could be entering Midgar at any one of the sectors. We could be in Sector 1 or 2 in this, like, reversed Midgar, right? For all we know. I don't know if we can ever get a visual of, like, a reactor in the background to, like, confirm that or not. But unless there's, like, a way to prove that while we're on that highway before we get sucked up in the tornado and shit, if we're, like, for sure 100% in, like, a reverse version of Sector 5, or if, like, Ultimania confirms that or something, we could be, like, anywhere. So when the Whisper tornado is, like, going through and, like, sucking up shit, we could potentially be in, like, the Singularity version of, like, Sector 1 or 2 or something. And while it's doing the Whisper tornado shit, there's an actual tornado in the real world fucking shit up, potentially. Or if we want to discuss the multiple timeline shit, right? Because regardless of what your thoughts are on that, there is 2 timelines. Even if maybe we're only dealing with one timeline itself in the story, there is the original Beagle timeline. Shit happens, there's Terror timeline, right? Like, there's 100% more than one timeline. We may not be, like, having these parallel stories taking place in one timeline, and another story taking place in this other timeline. But there is, from a very literal perspective, two different timelines. But maybe while we're in the Singularity and we're seeing the Whisper Tornado doing its shit, maybe over there interior timeline where our group's going to end up, there's an actual physical tornado happening because it's like a parallel dimension. Things happen similar but kind of different type shit. I'm trying to just further this discussion and hopefully try to make it make sense what I'm trying to say here. But even though we're probably only dealing with one timeline in Rebirth, there is still, Beagle timeline, Terror timeline, right? And it's possible, since we're inside the Singularity and doing all this shit, that what's happening in the Singularity is having a ripple effect in every timeline. Like, it's possible that the Whisper Tornado did what it did in the Terror timeline, which is what we're seeing with the trailer. But it's also possible that Whisper Tornado was doing some shit also in Beagle timeline, even if we never go back to Beagle timeline, even if we never see Beagle timeline again. It's possible that Tornado was fucking ship in Midgar as well. And in theory, if there's more than one timeline, there's probably like infinite numbers of timelines, even though we're not going to probably see that. In theory, since we're inside the goddamn Singularity, that Tornado could have been fucking up shit and 7,000 different timelines, even though we never actually see it. We're kind of getting off track with what the video was supposed to initially be about, but this stuff is kind of fun to talk about. Onto the trailer itself, the idea of like Shinra propaganda, I don't know, because I think there's too much unknowns right now because of the fact that the destruction we're seeing is in sectors 0, 1, and 2. We've not seen that in the game yet. We've not seen that in Remake because the destruction shit that happens is sector 7, which is like almost the complete opposite side of Midgar from where this tornado is happening. Unless some of the shit we're doing in the Singularity was having a real world effect, and that's why Sector 1 and 2 are destroyed. This like tornado or whatever, we've just not seen yet. So it's hard to say whether it's Shinra propaganda or not. And as for the bodies, like, again, I've had this discussion before on the channel a few times when talking about the trailer. I don't write it off entirely. It's just that, like, why would they already have like dead bodies of our characters, right? I'm not saying that it's impossible to do, because it's not. This is a magical world, and Hojo's like a mad scientist, could probably do anything you need. You could make fake bodies if you wanted to, I'm sure. But it's like the events that are taking place within like Remake are only over the course of like a couple days, right? Like there's only a couple of night-day cycles. Like when and where did they have time to make body doubles of our characters? But also the main thing that falls apart for me on the idea that is like Shinra propaganda of them taking down Avalanche is that we're missing Cloud, and Cloud is definitely would have been on camera at some point. Like our group was seen at the very beginning of the game with Sector 1. I think they don't get Cloud there, but they get Biggs, Jesse, Wedge, and obviously Barrett's. But I think during the Sector 5 Maka Reactor stuff, like our group's on camera like the whole goddamn time. That's the point, right? We want to take down Airbuster live on the air. So our group is all seen there, but we don't see Cloud in the beginning of the trailer. But also with the beginning of the trailer, we're seeing Aerith and Red 13, which are never, as far as we're shown, to be a part of the Avalanche shit. So like it's just the whole the propaganda thing, just, I don't know. It doesn't sit right with me for some reason. The other thing that kind of falls apart for me when we're talking about the propaganda stuff is that we're seeing the dead bodies of our characters, right? But if it's supposed to be Shinra propaganda, then why aren't they blaming the destruction on Avalanche? Like, whatever happened, whatever's being destroyed in Sectors 1 and 2, like, if it's supposed to be propaganda, why wouldn't they be saying destruction by Avalanche? Here's the dead body of Avalanche. We caught Avalanche. Is it supposed to be, like, the propaganda is supposed to be there was a tornado that ripped through Sectors 1 and 2, but in the process, Avalanche got taken down magically or something? Is that what the propaganda is? Because that seems kind of dumb. It'd be more so make sense, like, if the propaganda was that Avalanche did all this destruction, but we killed them in the process too. But that makes more sense for propaganda. Anyways, what actually kind of inspired me to want to make this video is when I was watching somebody play through Remake. Again, I'm not expected to like remember every goddamn line off the top of my head. But when I was watching somebody play through Remake, like whenever President Shinra has Barrett at gunpoint, he actually talks about like who's going to save the people from like a natural disaster, which I thought was really, really interesting now having the hindsight of the trailer. Now that we have the trailer and shit. Because we're seeing them saving everybody from a tornado, which is a natural disaster, right?
Picture a world without Shinra, without Mako energy. Stagnant, impotent world. Or picture a natural disaster. Who would help the people?
We're still here at the scene of this terrible disaster, caused by a massive tornado which swept through sectors 0, 1, and 2.
So that's why I don't entirely write off the idea of this being like some sort of like propaganda, Shinra cover-up type shit, or whatever the hell. And I do think the line from President Shinra now, again, having the hindsight of everything, was very intentional by Square Enix, but in what way, I'm not entirely sure. Like, at the very least, it could just be foreshadowing for the natural disaster that occurs at the end of the game with the tornado, and then apparently the tornado that happened in Rebirth, or just foreshadowing that Shinra would use, like, a natural disaster to kind of cover up whatever might have happened in Sector 1 and 2, and 0. But again, it's the bodies that are kind of bothering me, because if they're trying to pass off to the public that they took down Avalanche, for starters, we don't see Jesse, Biggs, or Wedge there. Now, we know that those guys died, or I guess technically didn't die if we're looking at like the ending of Remake and shit, but regardless, we know where they are, but they were on camera earlier in the game as a part of Avalanche, so why wouldn't they be there on the gurneys? But also, why would they be showing like Aerith and Red 13 as a part of Avalanche, but no Cloud, because we know Cloud was on camera at one point. And Cloud's missing body is what, for me, makes it feel like this is supposed to be the alternate timeline shit. And these characters maybe died in this timeline because of whatever that happened. Again, we don't even know what happens in Sectors 0, 1, and 2, because we've not seen that yet. But we don't see Cloud there, but we have seen an alternate Cloud that is saved by Zack, right? Zack appears to be alive and is carrying a Cloud to Midgar. So that explains where the missing Cloud could be. And everybody that's on the gurneys were everybody that was inside the Singularity minus Cloud. And I just think it all adds up to be the Terror Timeline version of these characters that died from something. And as we talked about before on this channel, there's like multiple theories out there of like dead characters. Like when we see like Zack at the end of episode intermission, he walks in the church. A lot of the theories out there were people are in the church mourning Aerith's death. I still am a little on the fence about that, just because people are stomping on her flowers. If they were mourning her death, why would they stomp her flowers? But we do see that, and we see a dead Aerith apparently at the beginning of the trailer, and there's also a theory of like a dead Barrett, right? We talked about it with the last video, actually, the Rude video. We talked about like the dead Barrett theory with Marlene, where she senses her dad at the end of Remake, and we're seeing a dead Barrett. So it's like, there's some stuff that has added up for a while now about multiple dead characters, and maybe Marlene sensed that Barrett, and maybe people are mourning that Aerith, but our Aerith and our Barrett are, of course, still alive. Maybe. But also, when it comes to the trailer itself, like, we have no idea when the dead body thing is happening, right? Like, they edit it with, like, the glitches and make it look like it's following, like, post-remake. But it might not be. Like, we have no idea, right? It's a trailer. I could take any one of our Remake or FF7 Rebirth trailers and add those, like, little glitches in anywhere to make it look suspicious. It might not be happening at the beginning of the game. This could be happening very, very late into the Rebirth story. For all we know, this could be something else entirely that's taking place. That has nothing to do with the ending of Remake. Anyways, it's more or less a video. It's a little all over the place. I wanted to talk about the propaganda stuff. I wanted to talk about, like, Shinra, President Shinra specifically mentioning a natural disaster in Remake, and then we're seeing that in the Rebirth trailer. Like, them talking about a tornado that ripped through, like, these sectors in Midgar. Like, I thought that was really interesting and a very intentional line by Square Enix, and maybe leaning in favor of a propaganda thing or them covering up. Or maybe it's the Sector 0, 1, and 2 shit that I feel like we haven't seen yet, as I mentioned multiple times in the video. Maybe it's something Shinra did, at least in this timeline, and is covering it up with a tornado thing, and then maybe throwing in the avalanche shit or whatever. I don't know. It's hard to say. So it's so exciting. It's so fun to talk about. Can't wait till the next goddamn trailer, dude. I hope that next trailer just blows our tits off. I want to see Zack, and I want to see some shit that we're just not expecting, man. And some stuff that we are expecting, of course. That's pretty much the video, my dudes. I am sweating my ass off. It is hot as shit these days. I've had like multiple excessive heat warnings pop up on my phone over the last couple of days, like 3 a.m. and shit. It's like that hot. We're getting excessive heat warning at 3 goddamn a.m. And as I've told you guys before, I have to turn my fucking AC off. That's why I'm kind of sweaty. That's why my face is a little bit red right now. My forehead's all shiny and shit. Like, fuck, it is hot. It's miserable to do these videos during the summer right now, but whatever. You know, that's why I put on black shirts so you don't see like the pit stains and shit. I don't give a fuck. I'll suffer for the content. Anyway, this video. Subscribe if you guys are new. Social networks in the description below. Follow me to YT. That's it. Bye. That's a fast one.
Used to care what people thought, but now I care more, and nobody out here's got it figured out. So therefore, I've lost all hope of a happy ending, depending on whether or not it's worth it. So insecure, no one's perfect. We spend it with no shame. We blow that like Coltrane. We in here like Low Gain or leave it like Cobain.